Yeah, so why don't we start from the top of Ner Shabbos, meaning how do we understand, I guess, the context or the getter of what is the chiyuv itself. So the Mishnah in Shabbos says, and as you said, Rick, this is pointed out. This is what we daven at the end of Kabbalah Shabbos every Friday night. So the Mishnah says, "Ein madlikim b'shemen sreifa b'yom tov." Rabbi Shmuel omer, "Ein madlikim be'itron mipnei kavod Shabbos." Um, that's really the piece that we're interested in. Is Rabbi Shmuel says we shouldn't be lighting with tar because of, and he says specifically because of kavod Shabbos. So the Gemara looks into that and says, "Why not? My time out. Why don't we light with tar? I mean, it's a it is a fuel, so it works. Why not?" So Amarava mitoch sherecho rag zereshama yanichena v'yetzei. Rava says that the problem is because it doesn't smell good. We're afraid that he is going to light Shabbos candles, or she's going to light Shabbos candles, and they're going to walk out the door. Right? They're not going to want to be inside the house. So Amar le Abaye v'yetzei. So Abaye says, so what? Meaning that they've done the chiyuv, like they lit Shabbos candles. What does it matter now if they choose to leave the house or if they choose to stay in the house? So Amar le, so Rava answers back, Sha'ani Omer adlakas ner Shabbos ner b'Shabbos chova. So Rava says, no, I hold that that halakas ner on Shabbos is a chiyuv. Now, that's a little bit confusing because what is this machlokas? It can't be the machlokas that Abai holds it's not a chiyuv, but Rava holds it is a chiyuv. That would be that's untenable. So we'll have to try and understand what exactly this machlokas is. I brought in there's let's just jump to Rashi and Tosfos on that Gemara. So Rashi says on that, says by chova, that Rava says it's a chiyuv. Kavod Shabbos hu she'ein seuda chashuva ela b'makam or ke'ein yamama beperek basar diyoma. So Rashi explains. So his understanding is we like Shabbos candles because of kavod, and that's actually what it says, right? We saw that in the Mishnah, kavod Shabbos. But what is it specifically? But what we're saying specifically is it's about the Seuda. And so what's Rava worried about? Rava's worried you're going to walk out of the house and you're not going to have Shabbos candles with your Seuda. So maybe you don't return until the flame is already gone and then you're eating in the dark, whatever the situation is, but you're not having your Shabbos Seuda with the candles. And Rashi explains that what's the Indian here? The Indian is that we should have a nice bright room, like as if it were bright like daylight. Let's look at Tosfos though and see what he says. So Tosfos says, "Alakas ner b'Shabbos chova, perush b'makam seuda." Very similar to Rashi. He's also worried. Rava, his understanding is that Rava is concerned about the seuda. Dechova hi sheyisa b'makam haner mishum oneg. But Tosfos says it's not kavod Shabbos, it's oneg Shabbos that we're worried about. Mehadlakas ner gufei lo hava porech abaye depshita dechova hi. So, and Tosfos is starting to ask our question. So it can't be, he says, that Abaye doesn't even hold by the chiyuv. No, Vada he holds that there is a chiyuv of hadlakas neros on Shabbos. The question is whether Abaye holds that it's that it's tied together, that it's an Indian of oneg Shabbos and connected to the Seuda or not. Okay, so we're already starting to develop a little bit of a framework for how we understand what the Shabbos candles are really for. According to Rashi and Tosfos, it's all about the Seuda. Now, I wanted to jump back up. There's a Gemara earlier on Shabbos Chav Gimel, and I think some of us, sort of have heard this idea. It says, "Amar Rava pshitale, pshitale near base of a near Chanukah." Right? This is talking about Chanukah, and when you light your Chanukah, but it says near bais, near beso adif mishum shalom beso. And I think we've all sort of familiar with this idea that the lights in the house, the neros, are because of shalom bais. Now this is talking about the fact that you should be lighting your, basically when you when you're going to light Hanukkah candles, first thing you want to make sure is that you've got, candles set up. This is obviously before electricity, but you had some kind of light going on in your house because of Shalom Bayis. Then you can start to worry about lighting the Chanukiah. So I just wanted to point out that it doesn't seem like, and we'll see the Rambam in a moment, but at least from Rashi and Tosfos, they're not talking at all about Shalom Bayis. So that doesn't seem to be the Inyan here. The Inyan of Shalom Bayis seems to transcend Shabbos. That would be applicable any day of the week, that you just want to have a well-lit house. But let's look at the Rambam. Hilchos Shabbos, the beginning of the 5th parak. And he says, Hadlakas ner b'Shabbos ina reshus im ratza madlik v'im ratza eno madlik. It's not he says that there's no idea that it's up to you whether you want to light or not. V'lo mitzvah she'eno chayev lirdov achareha ad she'yasena kegon eruv v'chatzoros and nintila shadayim la'achila ela zechova. And it's interesting, he compares candles, but what he's saying is that you can't just say, well, you know what, I don't mind being in the dark, or I don't mind a dimly lit house. I'm going to forego candles. And he compares it to, like an eruv chatzeros. So if I don't want to walk around, within my courtyard of houses, I don't want to be able to walk around with food items or anything else. I don't have to make an eruv chatzeros. There's no mitzvah to make an eruv chatzeros. It's only if I want to walk around on Shabbos between these houses that share a courtyard, then I have to make an eruv chatzeros. Or I don't have to wash negovas or netilas yadayim unless I want to eat bread. If I eat bread, then I have to do it. So there's no independent chiyuv for these two mitzvahs. But the Rambam says, in distinction to the neirus of Shabbos, no, that's something that sits independently, and you have to do it. And it says, you have to sit with in a lit house. And he says clearly it's about oneg Shabbos, is that even if you can't afford them, you have to go to the Tomchei Shabbos, and you'll get what you need, but you have to have Nerus and Shabbos because of oneg Shabbos. One last thing he says at the end of this, he gives us the bracha that we make. And this is Gederach shemevorech al kol devarim shehu chayiv behem min divrei sofrim. So the Rambam makes it clear that it seems like that we're talking about this is D'Rabbanan, this isn't a Deraisa, which also goes along with the idea that it's oneg Shabbos, or even if it's kavod Shabbos, like Rashi said up above. And just to maybe go down that path for a moment, the Rambam introduces a concept in Perak Lamed at the beginning. It says in Shabbos still, Arba devarim ne'emru b'Shabbos, shnai min haTorah u'shnai midivrei sofrim, ve'im meforshin al yedei neviim, shebeTorah zachar v'shamar. Everything that's deraisa comes from shamar v'zachar, right? The asayis and the los asayis. When is parshu al yedei neviim kavod v'oneg. But all the derabbanans come to us from the neviim, and there we're talking about. And those all fall under the auspices or the I guess the rubric of either kavod v'oneg, and that comes from a pasuk in Yeshayahu. The pasuk in Yeshayahu, which is brought up here, im tashiv mishabas raglecha asos chavatzecha biyom kodshei. And this pasuk is really darshaned out for all different aspects of Shabbos. The im tashiv mishabas raglecha, that's talking about the Tchumei Shabbos, that you shouldn't be, taking a long walk outside of, outside of the Tchum. The Krosh of the Shabbos Oneg Likdosh Hashem B'Chumbad, and it talks about Oneg Shabbos. That's the Seudos of Shabbos, Kavod Shabbos, the way that we dress for Shabbos, and other things. Or according to Rashi, the Nerus of Shabbos fall under that category of Kavod Shabbos. Ma'asos D'Rechecha Mimtzo Chavatzecha, and that's that we're not trying to do business. We're not v'daber dover. We're not the people who don't or try not to read secular things like a newspaper or something on Shabbos because v'daber dover. So all of these concepts of D'Rabbanan, I don't know all, but I mean you can see there's like several different categories of D'Rabbanan level ideas of Shabbos all come from this pasuk in Yeshayahu. And that's what the Rambam is referring to, that when we're talking about something that's kavod Shabbos or oneg Shabbos, this is where it's learned out from. Certainly in a smachta anyway for the Rabbanan. And just one other thought from the Rambam on this idea of, kavod and oneg Shabbos, or probably more so on the idea of kavod Shabbos. He says, "Misader adam shulchano berev Shabbos." You should set out your table, right? You have a set table before Shabbos. V'alpi she'enu tzarich ela l'kzayis v'chem misader shulchan v'matzei Shabbos v'alpi she'enu tzarich ela l'kzayis kedei lechabdo b'knisaso v'tziyaso. Your table should be set all through Shabbos, and that's kavod of Shabbos, to have a nice looking table that looks like it's sort of ready to go. He says, "V'tzarich lasakin beisu mibod yom," and you should, clean the house during the day before Shabbos comes in. Mipnei kavod Shabbos. All of this is also kavod Shabbos. V'hi ner daluk. This is where the candles lit. Shulchan aruch, table set. Le'achol umitu mutzas, and you should have your beds made. Shekol elu kavod Shabbos heim. So all that's that all falls under this category that we saw about kavod Shabbos. Okay, so now I think at least we've got some of an idea, like where does this mitzvah, this chiyuv come from of lighting Shabbos candles? Clearly from the Rambam and from Rashi, it's kavod Shabbos. Now Rambam doesn't bring in the idea of he doesn't say specifically that the neros of Shabbos are for the Seudah. Although it's interesting, he says in this last line in Perek Lamed, he says, "V'yeh ner daluk v'shulchan aruch." He does sort of connect the two together, that the Ner Daluk and the Shulchan Aruch are right next to each other. Maybe that's an indication that he's also thinking that that it connects to the Suda, like Rashi and Tosfos said. And Tosfos says it's not only that it's connected to the Suda, but it's really about Oneg Shabbos. It really enhances, I guess, the Suda itself when you're eating in a nice, well lit or nice, nice because the candles, something like that. So let's take a look in Shulchan Aruch a little bit more about halach lamaisa around the neiros themselves. So in Shulchan Aruch in Reish Samech Gimel, he says Yehi zahir la'asos ner yafa v'yesh mekavnim la'asos shtei psilos echad keneged zachar ve'echad keneged shamor. So interestingly, we're probably all familiar. It seems really common that people will light a minimum of 2 candles for Shabbos, right? And then there's different minhagim. Some people add one more for children and other things, but it seems like the minimum is 2. Maybe this is the source for that one is keneged zachar, the other keneged shamor, right? From the Aseres Adibros, the 2 sets of Aseres Adibros, where it says zachar Yom HaShabbos Lakadsho and shamar Yom HaShabbos Lakadsho. We read that. We read the second set this Shabbos, don't we, Ms. Chanan?
Yes.
And the Mishnah Brura there says, "Hine ikar hadlakas haner hu chova mishum mitzvos oneg Shabbos." So the Mishnah Brura says similar to what we saw in Tosfos, "Machmas hidra mitzvah yir la'asos yafa," and the idea of it is that it's sort of a hidra mitzvah that having the neros of Shabbos sort of enhance our seudah, which is certainly about oneg Shabbos. And then in let's see, in Reish Samech Gimel, we're still in there, halacha beis, or I should say sif beis. Echad anashim nashim b'chayim lios b'batim ner dalek b'Shabbos afilu eno ma yocho sho al psachim l'kech shemem madlik as haner shezeh b'chal oneg Shabbosu. And we see it called out, or called out outright by the Mechaber, by the Shulchan Aruch himself. Again, it's all about oneg Shabbos. Similar to what the Rambam said, similar to what Tosfos said. Okay. Now, let's shift gears for a moment. There's an interesting shaila that comes up, certainly today, when our houses are completely well lit with our electric lights. So if the idea is that it's all about the Seudah, and it's all about having a nicely lit area, we don't want it to be a dimly lit area for this Seudah. So once we already have the lights on, why are we lighting Shabbos candles? And maybe to even ask the question more specifically, are we allowed to make a bracha of lahadlik ner shel Shabbos when really the neros of the Shabbos, right, the licht from the Shabbos is pretty minimal when you compare it to the light bulbs that we have, right, that are lighting up our room. And there's these shilas have been asked to Rav Moshe going back, probably a couple of decades or a few decades. I saw there was the shah that was posed to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So let's try to understand like where the shah comes from, and how we can at least understand it, starting from Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll see how the how we can try to understand it just from the early, at least the earliest halachic sources. So in Sif Ches, in Reish Samach Gimel, the Mechaber says, Bezer Gimel Bale Batim Ochin B'Makom Echad. What happens when you have several families that are eating together, right, in one room, maybe one house, one room, could be the same thing back in those days. So he says, Yesh Omrim Shekol Echad Mevorich Al Menorah Shelo. He says there are those who say that each family can make the bracha. Now here's the question. So let's take this apart a little bit. The problem is that once the first family, I guess, lights their menorah, lights their Shabbos Neiros, the room is lit. So what's the second group doing, right? So now we can sort of see the connection to the idea of the electric lights that we have today, right? Once the room is lit, what about all the subsequent families? Or in our case, once a room is lit, are we, should we be making a bracha on the Shabbos candles?
Once the first candle is lit.
What's that?
Once the first candle is lit.
Right, exactly. Once the first ones are lit, right, that's, so there's a Yesh Omrim that everyone does. Even so, everyone should make a bracha on their individual candelabras, right? Their neiros that they're lighting within this house, right? Because they're all sharing one room. Maybe today you could look at it as like, you have a big event space, right? And everyone's having Shabbos together and everyone's lighting together in that same room. So it says Yesh Omrim that you do. However, it says V'yesh megam ge medavar v'nachon lizaher b'savei brachos v'lo yavarich ela echad. So the Mechaber says, no, you shouldn't do it that way. Only one, right? The first person or the first family or whatever it is, they light, but nobody else should. Nobody else should make a bracha. I guess you could light, I don't know, but nobody else should make that bracha because we say Savei brachos lahakel. We wouldn't make that bracha. Now the Ramah paskins haga aval anu ein nogin kain. So the Ramah says no. We go by the first opinion, the Yesh Omrim. So Ashkenazim in this situation, what we would paskin like the Ramah, and each family could do this. So now we can sort of see where the in is for us when we're talking about a room that's well lit with electric lights. But let's sort of understand it a little bit more. So the Magen Avraham on the spot in Reish Samach Gimel says Shekol Echad Mevorich, everyone can make the bracha. He says, because every time a new candle is being lit, there is additional light, and that translates to additional shalom and simcha and hanas of the you get pleasure from the light of the candles, and it sort of spreads throughout all the corners of the room, of the house. He goes on and talks about a different Indian, but that's the idea that from the Magen Avraham is that why can you make a bracha? Because every time you're lighting something new, you are adding. There is something additional that's going on. It doesn't seem like he's saying quantitatively, but maybe it's more qualitatively, right? Because he's saying there's a simcha yasera, right? I don't know that he's saying that it's more lit. Maybe he is, but he's certainly saying it sounds like from a qualitative standpoint as well. And then we have the Eliya Rabbah, who says on the same spot, he says, Davka b'shekol echad menorah b'fnei atzma b'zavias acheres kadei she'yeh me'irim kol zavias. He says, obviously there's not even a question if everyone starts lighting in different corners, different areas of the room, because especially, thinking about in those days, I mean, even if you're lighting a few candles in a room in a house, you're not, it's not like what we have today where you're lighting, the whole house is lit up. So if you can separate them, you are certainly without a doubt adding light into all the different areas of this room where you've got a few families, who are gonna have a Suda together. But he says, Aval menorah acha sheyesh la harbe pios ein mevorech ela echod That's the shla. The shla says, but if you only have one, and everyone is just going to, maybe it has several branches coming off of it. Each family is lighting their own branch. He says the shla says no. Only one can make the bracha. He says, "Aval shemati zekini agon zichrona levracha." I'm not sure who he's quoting here. He says, "Pasuk kavase v'chein mistaver mibe pamutos shalanu im dolik kol hanerutz azeh ha'ar mamshich lechol zavias ve'od de'im ken kishiyish shnei menorot azeh etzel zeh lo yevaruchu v'lo mashma achim merama poskim." He says, but that's not what the Ramah says. The Ramah himself says that we can be, everyone can be making their own bracha. And he says himself, and here's the thing, the more that you put candles, even if it's in one spot, you are still adding light throughout the whole room. Gam nirali raya mitshuvas maharil sim. So he's also quoting the Maharil that says the same thing. That it seems like, again, even if quantitatively you're not adding any more light to the room, you can still make a bracha. So here we have, and I've seen Rav Asher Weiss today, Dayan Weiss, the Minchas Asher. He says specifically, he says, I don't see a problem with making that bracha. The lights are on already, and then you light your Shabbos candles, not a problem. He actually brings in an idea. He says, when you think about it, he says, you are doing something even, I'm not sure if he was thinking quantitatively or qualitatively, but he says there is certainly a difference, because typically in our dining room, the lights are all the way at the ceiling. We're lighting, and then when we light our own Shabbos candles, right, they're either on the table or typically they're near the table. It's a different thing. You certainly are adding light, you're adding something else in a different spot. But according to Rav Asher Weiss, not a problem of making this bracha. Other poskim though, like the Chut Hasheni says, you really should be turning on. I don't know if you've seen, there's a minhag some people have that they turn on they might turn off the lights in the house right before candle lighting, turn them back on, light candles, and make the bracha, so it's all sort of together. But again, according to Rav Asher Weiss, you wouldn't have to do that. But this is where I'm not sure, if you've heard this question or these questions that have come up, this is where it's coming from, and certainly we see that there is room to for what the minhagim are today, that most people are just lighting without doing anything to the electrical, without making any different things with about the electric lights. People are just lighting their Shabbos candles, and we see why that. You're adding something. We see that all the way back from the Elia Rabbah, the Ramah, the Magen Avram, that you're still lighting, or when you're lighting your Shabbos candles, you're still doing something. One last thing I did note, I saw, I didn't bring it, and I couldn't find it to bring it into the source sheet. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is quoted in one of the Ha'aros in Shmira Shabbos Kehilchasa. So if you have that sefer, you can look up. It's in Perek Mem Gimel, and the Ha'ara, I think, is Kuf Ayin Aleph. But he's asked that question, and he's sorry, it wasn't Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. It was the Divrei Yatziv, Rav Asher Weiss. Actually, he himself, it's his own Rebbe, the Kloisenberger Rebbe, said his thought was, well, even with electric candles, so he survived the Holocaust, and he was nifter, I think, in 1994. So when he was asked the question, he said, well, there's something special about lighting candles, and that just the idea of having beautiful candelabra and beautiful candles does something to the table. So, in addition to the light, the candles themselves. Interestingly, Rav Asher Weiss dismisses that and says, this is my Rebbe, but I have to dismiss this because we see from the Magen Avram and others, there's no idea of the ambiance of the candelabra itself. It all seems to be coming from the light. But either way, there seems to be plenty of room for us to be, to continue our minhagim of lighting Shabbos candles the way that we have always done so. I'm not sure in Sephardi communities, I'm not sure if they do something different, because certainly the Mechaber isn't poskening like the Ramah. And the Mechaber seems to be saying that it could be problematic. So I'm not sure. I didn't look up in like the Ben Ish Chai or any of the Sephardi poskim. Maybe Yabia Omer. I don't know, but that might be more of a question for the Svardim.
Jeff, we are creating light, not eliminating darkness. So I see no problem of aggregation. I hear what you're saying, but I don't understand the technicality.
You don't understand the question?
No, I understand the question.
Yeah.
The problem of the technicality doesn't seem to me that applies.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So here's my personal view of it is because I was thinking about it and I was thinking, to me, there is something qualitatively different when you walk into, I was thinking about it, like when I walk into the house, right, Friday night after shul, and I think there's just something different about walking into a house where the dining room lights are on and walking into a house where the dining room lights are on, but then the Shabbos licht.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's not so much that there's, and again, I don't think it's a quantitative that there's more light. I just think there is something beautiful about seeing the lit candles. And I think that's what the Ramah, that's what the Magen Avram, that's what the Eliyah Rabbah are saying, is that additional, and it's not the candelabra by itself, like the Divrei Yotzi was saying, because it has to be lit. Like the candelabra itself, when it's not lit, I don't think it adds anything. But when you've got those, and I think that's what they're saying, is that we make a brach on it because we are making it more special. We are adding to the simcha, we're adding to the oneg Shabbos or kavod Shabbos, either way, right? You can look at it from either direction, but we're certainly adding to Shabbos by having those Shabbos candles there.